Uh, I hope you can hear me because sometimes I do have some problems with my internet connection. So that's why I would probably prefer to switch with no camera and then focus on the text and then move back. So let's start with what I want to say today in my presentation. I'm presenting the study on the use of complex concepts in simple language, an analysis of secondary school science textbooks. This study is actually a continuation of several previous research projects we studied at our research center, which is indeed a linguistics and computational linguistics center. We have conducted on Romanian school textbooks. What is probably surprising is the fact that we are the first in our country who have tried to do this. So there have been plenty of textbook, science textbook, and any kind of textbook development in our country. We have many models, but nobody tried to understand if the language is okay with these textbooks. So our initiative was based on the observation that students struggle not only with national and international assessments, but also with the overall demands placed on them, not only by the national curricula, but also by how the textbooks are reflected in this national curriculum. Let's have a look at what I want to tell you today. So a few introductory words on why research on school textbooks. And then I'm going to tell you something about several research aspects related to school science textbooks, textbooks design. And of course, it's interesting to mention where we have our data, what sort of approach we implemented. And there are several aspects that we focused on in our research. One of them is linguistic density. The other one is the visual elements in the textbooks and the relationship to the text. And a bit of a more focus was dedicated to the case studies analysis on disciplinary terminology. And at this stage, what we tried to do was to also have a look from a comparative perspective at the Romanian textbooks compared with what happens in international textbooks, let's say the English-speaking textbooks. And the final points are dedicated to concluding remarks and the discussion points. Let's begin with the role of textbooks in learning. Despite we all know that AI is quite important nowadays, and it's got to be in a huge competition with what teaching materials have to offer in education. But at the same time, well-designed textbooks remain essential for knowledge transfer, I'd say, because a good textbook serves as a structured guide and that helps students navigate concepts and develop an understanding of the discipline. However, not all textbooks fulfill this role. This brings us to the challenges in the creation of science textbooks. Many textbooks suffer from poor structure or a lack of coherence or ineffective practice techniques or what the students are asked to do. Instead of supporting learning, they sometimes, unfortunately, become barriers, making it harder for the students to grasp scientific concepts. But from my personal point of view, from the research center I am coordinating, one of the most critical aspects influencing textbook effectiveness is actually language. Linguistic features such as cohesion, coherence, terminology, readability play a fundamental role in making science content more accessible or not. So with these introductory words in mind, let's move on to to several issues in more detail. What does school science textbook research investigate? So there are several general aspects, like for instance, alignment with the curriculum, which ensures that textbooks reflect national educational standards and learning objectives. Some other studies focus on visual aids, the use of images, diagram, and so on, all the multimodal elements. On the other side, there are the linguistic aspects that deserve attention, like readability and linguistic complexity, or the disciplinary terminology. And what we have particularly investigated in our latest studies is linguistic overload. And let's have even more insight into the matter. For instance, in point of curriculum alignment and the way it improves learning, research states that textbooks that are well aligned with national guidelines help prevent content overload. This is particularly important in subjects like biology and physics, the one we are also investigating in the current study. Second, when we look at the balance between visual elements and the text, research states that diagrams and other visual aids can be really important tools for learning if they are well integrated into the text. And also, as I mentioned briefly before, there is the impact that the latest technologies have on learning and learning sciences. The rise of multimodal large language models, of course, presents a lot of opportunities. They can enhance learning by providing interactive content. However, again, if they are not carefully integrated, excessive visual content may distract students rather than help them. And in point of linguistic aspects, also mentioned before briefly, I'd say that what's most important and was also very often mentioned in literature in the field are readability, the way text structures affects learning, and of course, the linguistic overload. The last part is the one that, as I've said, we focused on in previous studies, and what we have identified is the fact that the phenomenon of linguistic overload is present in almost all textbooks in Romania. And what we investigated was the Romanian language and literature linguistic characteristics, and there was actually a huge excess of linguistic elements overall. So the data regarding the specifics of the current study, we have used the ROTEX corpus. This is a large corpus that we have been building. It consists of Romanian school textbooks from all grades, from 1 to the 12th grade. What I have to mention, maybe because it might be interesting, is the comparison between our let's say the textbook system 30 years ago, when we had only one textbook per discipline per grade. So it was a unique textbook used in the whole country for each discipline and grade. And then after the fall of the communism, we moved on to an alternative textbook system, meaning that for each discipline, each grade, now we have to choose. We can choose between 3 to 11 textbooks because there are many offers, let's say. And what we have taken for this study was a subset of these textbooks in physics and biology. That's why it's called raw phys and raw bio, from the 5th to the 8th grade. And what we have used as an analysis framework, what is something that we have developed ourselves. It's called the Linguistic Related Textbooks Analysis Framework, LTAF. And it encompasses several parameters that can be included in any textbook analysis. And of course, what's special about this particular study is that we have conducted several analyses where we have also contrasted with international textbooks. And now let's move to the analysis part. I mean, the core of the study. First of all, linguistic density. This is something that we identified in our LTAF framework as LTAF number 1. So it is the first basic analysis you can do on textbooks, meaning that you can actually count which is the density of the word per page, because this can be done almost automatically, or depending on the processing stages that you have to go through, it involves several other procedures. But it's interesting because at the first look, you can get a confirmation or an information of what you notice when you open a textbook. Is it dense in words or not? So in physics, we noticed that the most intensively linguistic was Arclet, and it was followed by the Corinth, and the least intensive was the or dense linguistically was Litera. As for the biology, we noticed that there are several textbooks that are high in linguistic elements, and only one at the end booklet, which is a bit more, let's say, airy, meaning that there are not so many words in this textbook. And this can be noticed also when you open these textbooks. Let's have a look. It's like you open it yourselves. So on the left-hand side, we have Arclet, which was in our analysis the highest in density. And then we have on the right-hand side, we have another example where it's a bit more less dense in linguistic elements. And you can notice that at the first sight. And a second parameter we considered in our analysis was the amount of visual elements and their relationship to the text. Because we did that on a sample basis, because it is still not possible for us to do that automatically. We are trying to create a methodology where we use our corpus linguistic analysis with AI technology so we can count this more accurately. But we used samples in order to create an hierarchy of the visual elements that we have in the different textbooks, and this is what we came up with. And this is again an example of what you can see on the in the Corinth example. You can see how many. This was the highest ranking textbook in visual elements. You can see that there are plenty of visual elements, and they are everywhere. And you don't only have visuals and graphs and images. You also have text boxes and different colors, and there are simply too many. And the other example is from Litera, which is a bit slighter in visual elements, and it's also more easy to read. At the same time, let's have a look at the old textbooks. I mean, the one that were used in, let's say, the so-called communist times. It was, from a textbook design perspective, they were a lot better. So it's not easy to say this because we hope that things get better in time, but this is not the case. So it was a lot better at that time to have a look at the lesson, at the explanations. They were nicely highlighted, and the images were also reflecting what was taught in that particular lesson. And we did the same for the biology textbook. And again, you can see the difference between the highest ranking and the lowest ranking in visual elements textbooks. And again, we have an example from the older textbooks, which, in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, from the perspective of the textbook design research, this is something that we have to look up to. And the last element that we looked into was readability. When we say readability, this is something that has been performed regarding English language textbooks for a long time now. So these formulas, there are plenty of readability formulas for the English language. They are really practical. They have been implemented for a long time now. And if we want to look at other languages, it's not easy because they are language adapted, but they still can capture some of the elements that represent a certain degree of readability of a textbook. And we used these three formulas: the Flesch-Kincaid reading ease, the Gunning-Fogg index, and the Lemy index, which is our own index, because what we did was to develop our own readability platform assessment, where you can upload your own text into Romanian and find out how difficult the text is for reading. And the results were actually amazing and depressing at the same time, because what we found out that the sixth grade textbooks display a degree of the readability which is a lot higher than what the students have to be offered. So with our own formula, there was a 9 to 10th grade difficulty for particular textbooks, and with the international formula, it stated that they have a college level and even a professional level readability. And this is how it looks. So we took one page, let's say different pages, different samples from different textbooks, and we uploaded them into this platform, which is our platform, Lemi one. And this is the result. You get there at the bottom. You can see for which grade this text is adapted. Yes, 5 minutes. Yes, I'm going to be there. So it's actually a text that's have a third degree of complexity. It's actually better for the 12th graders, not for the 6th graders. And in point of the text, the case study analysis, what we have done is to look at the terminology. And this is, again, something very dramatic because as we noticed in the other elements, the density and visual elements and the readability was also confirmed by the terminology assessment. So there are plenty of advanced terms in the ArcLET physics textbook. And what's also most worrying is the fact that what we have in the physics textbooks, there are plenty of mathematical requirements that exceed the 6th grade level. So the kids are at a certain points with mathematical concepts, but in the physics, they are required to use very complex concepts, and that assumes a proficiency in algebraic manipulation that is not really there. And of course, excessive complexity of terminology and unnecessary difficulty overall. And this is also confirmed by the biology textbook. So if you have a look, for instance, at this extract from a biology unit, you can see all these terms that are actually introduced, or rather preferably introduced in either high school or even introductory college lessons. So how can 6th grade students get along with something like this? How can understand this terminology? How can they understand the science behind it? And again, in comparison, looking at the international offers and what happens in the English language context, you can see there is really a different perspective, because again, the way terminology is introduced is done gradually, and then every new term is explained, and then the new summary is offered to make sure that the kids understand all the concept, and the visuals are kept to a minimum and not overly complex. And in point of final comments, I'd say that more or less are the things that I already pointed out, namely that science textbooks often exceed the cognitive level expected for the 6th graders, making it quite difficult for them to comprehend their lessons. And our main recommendation, let's say, is that science textbooks should match the student cognitive levels, and this should be paid particular attention. And we have to reduce complexity, improve readability, and use clear visuals. And in the end, I also, this is something I support because I'm a linguist. Linguistic validation frameworks like the one we developed, the LTAF, ensure a better accessibility to scientific knowledge and effective learning. So yes, that should be it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Very, very interesting, Madalina. I mean, it just sensitized me